Alright, let's dive into this because it's a story that's equal parts heartbreaking and infuriating. The Nancy Guthrie kidnapping case, now over 6 months old, has become a glaring example of what happens when an investigation seems to stumble at every turn. And here's the kicker: Nancy is the mother of Today Show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie. So, this isn't just a local story, it's got national attention, and yet, progress has been painfully slow. Personally, I think what makes this case so compelling isn't just the tragedy itself, but the growing suspicion that the Pima County Sheriff's Department might have botched key parts of the investigation. It's one of those situations where you can't help but wonder, could this have been handled differently? And if so, what does that mean for the Guthrie family, and for anyone else relying on law enforcement in similar situations? Here's the thing: the Guthries have been incredibly gracious publicly, thanking law enforcement for their efforts. But let's be real, if my loved one was missing, and 6 months later there were still no leads, no suspects, and no answers, I'd be beyond frustrated. The Wall Street Journal's recent exposé on the case didn't help matters, highlighting what many are calling serious missteps by the Sheriff's Department. And now, there's talk of the Guthrie family potentially suing Pima County. But here's where it gets complicated. Savannah Guthrie is a wealthy, high-profile journalist. This isn't about money for her family, it's about accountability. What many people don't realize is that lawsuits like these often aren't about compensation, they are about forcing transparency and ensuring mistakes aren't repeated. From my perspective, this case raises a deeper question: how much leeway should law enforcement get when their actions, or inactions, have life or death consequences? Now, let's talk about the legal side of this, because it's a minefield. Mark Geragos, the celebrity attorney, thinks the Guthries have a case. But other legal experts, like Brian Sullivan and Dan Abrams, are far more skeptical. Sullivan points out that suing law enforcement for negligence is incredibly difficult, and Abrams goes further, calling it almost impossible. What this really suggests is that even if the Sheriff's Department made critical errors, the legal system is structured to protect them. Qualified immunity, for instance, shields officers from liability as long as they are acting in good faith. But here's the rub: what if their good faith decisions were actually reckless? One thing that immediately stands out is the handling of the ransom notes. The Guthries were willing to pay, but did law enforcement advise against it? And if so, was that the right call? This raises a burning question: what if they'd paid by the deadline? Would Nancy still be alive? It's a haunting what-if that no family should have to grapple with. What makes this even more frustrating is the internal drama within the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Sheriff Chris Nanos has been under fire for his leadership, with critics like former Lieutenant Heather Lappin accusing him of removing top detectives for political reasons. Personally, I find it baffling that someone like David Stivers, who was reprimanded for mishandling evidence in a homicide case, was not only kept on but promoted. And then there's the blood on Nance's porch, a crucial piece of evidence that was left unsecured for hours, potentially contaminated by reporters and delivery drivers. If you take a step back and think about it, this isn't just a series of mistakes, it's a pattern of incompetence that has real-world consequences. This case isn't cold, it's frozen because of avoidable errors. Here's where I land on this: the Guthrie family suing Pima County might seem like a long shot legally, but it could be their only way to get answers. Savannah Guthrie is a journalist, and journalists dig for the truth. This isn't just about her mother's case, it's about exposing systemic issues that could affect countless others. In my opinion, the real victory here wouldn't be a financial payout, it would be forcing the department to confront its failures and make changes. Because if this can happen to a family with national attention and resources, imagine what happens to cases that fly under the radar. This story isn't just about one investigation gone wrong, it's about the trust we place in law enforcement, and what happens when that trust is broken. And that, my friends, is something we all need to think about.